But for the state, to prosecute a 14-year-old for first-degree murder is ludicrous and obscene.
Life without parole or the death penalty sounds like something only reserved for grown-ups. But sometimes, teenagers find themselves facing these harsh sentences due to the severity of their crimes. Don't believe it? Check this out.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Michael Shane Bargo Jr., should be sentenced to death.
Therefore, the sentence of death shall be imposed upon...
This kid was just 15 when he got hit with 4 life sentences with 0 chance of freedom. This other kid was 14 when he got the same fate.
It is the sentence of this court that you be delivered by the sheriff of Polk County into the custody of the Department of Corrections of the state of Florida to be confined in prison without the benefit of parole for the rest of your natural life.
Crazy, right? In this video, we will look at 12 kids who met their end in court. Joshua Phillips. On November 3rd, 1998, 14-year-old Joshua Phillips killed his 8-year-old friend Maddie Clifton. Phillips said Maddie came to his house in Jacksonville, Florida to play baseball. He accidentally hit her in the eye with a ball, making her bleed and scream. Afraid of his father's reaction, he dragged her inside and hit her with a bat to stop her screams. He then hid her under his bed. When he realized she was still alive, he cut her throat and stabbed her in the chest several times. Phillips cleaned himself and the area, retaped the wooden panel of his bed where he hid her, and used incense and air fresheners to cover the smell of her decomposing body. For the next week, Phillips helped search for Maddie and put up flyers. On November 10th, his mother, Melissa, found her body after noticing a wet spot on his bedroom floor. She called the police, who arrested Phillips at school. He confessed to the murder within hours. Phillips was tried as an adult and convicted of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence without parole.
I'm certain that on Judgment Day, you, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, will be given a far harsher sentence. Until that day, it is the sentence of this court that you be delivered by the sheriff of Polk County into the custody of the Department of Corrections of the state of Florida to be confined in prison without the benefit of parole for the rest of your natural life.
However, the defendant's father was unhappy with the sentence and blamed the victim's parents.
But for the state, to prosecute a 14-year-old for first-degree murder is ludicrous and obscene. Mr. Shorstein and Mr. Plotkin should be ashamed of themselves in this matter. Their actions were carefully plotted for the press to further their own political gains.
The defendant's mother also said she didn't believe her son was guilty.
There are no words to describe what I felt that morning. And I stand here still with reasonable doubt in my heart that Josh even did what he was convicted of. I have no doubt in regard to the brain lesions, but I do have reasonable doubt in that I have never in 15+ years ever seen Josh violent towards another living being.
However, in 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences without parole for juveniles are unconstitutional. This made Phillips eligible for a resentencing hearing in 2017. During the hearing, he apologized to Maddie's family and showed remorse.
I don't pretend to know or understand your pain or to grasp the void that I have created in your lives. I can say this: I do understand pain. I did something horrible. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened.
However, the judge upheld the life sentence due to the severity of the crime. Joshua Phillips was very young when he committed his crime. The next entry, though, was even 2 years younger than Phillips. Lionel Tate. On July 28, 1999, 12-year-old Lionel Tate killed 6-year-old Tiffany Unick while copying wrestling moves he saw on TV. Tate, who weighed about 170 pounds, was left alone with Tiffany, who weighed just 48 pounds, while his mother napped upstairs. Tate said he accidentally killed Tiffany while showing her wrestling moves. However, the attack was so forceful it was compared to a fall from a 3-story building. Tiffany suffered a fractured skull and rib, brain bleeding, a lacerated liver, and many bruises. A child abuse expert said the beating lasted around 5 minutes. Tate had a history of behavioral issues, including fighting, lying, and stealing, and had been suspended from school 15 times. Despite this, his mother rejected a plea deal of 3 years in prison and 10 years probation. Tate was tried as an adult for first-degree murder, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison without parole, making him the youngest person in modern U.S. history to get this sentence.
The statute said simply, a conviction for murder in the first degree is a mandatory life sentence. I had no options but to follow the law and sentence Lionel Tate to.
Some people, including the jury, thought the sentence was too harsh. They felt that life in prison wouldn't help him or the victim.
Throwing him in jail for the rest of his life is not helping him. It's not helping society. It's certainly not helping, Tiffany Unick.
Even the prosecutor agreed it was too severe, saying he thought life without parole was inappropriate.
I realized that Tiffany Unick had justice, but I made no secret by the fact that I found life in prison with no parole inappropriate as a sentence.
In 2004, an appeals court overturned his conviction because he hadn't had a mental competency hearing before the trial. He then accepted a plea deal, was released after 3 years in prison, and served 1 year of house arrest and 10 years of probation. However, Tate broke his probation several times. In 2004, he was caught outside his home with a knife. In 2005, he was charged with armed robbery and violating parole for robbing a pizza delivery man at gunpoint. In 2006, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for having a gun. In 2008, he accepted a 10-year sentence for the robbery, which he will serve at the same time as the 30-year sentence. The next entry was just 2 years older than Lionel Tate when he robbed, raped, and killed his teacher. Philip Chisholm. On October 22, 2013, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm raped and murdered his 24-year-old math teacher, Colleen Ritzer, at Danvers High School in Massachusetts. Chisholm followed Ritzer into a school bathroom, where he strangled and stabbed her at least 16 times with a box cutter and raped her. He then stuffed her body into a recycling barrel, dragged it to the woods, and assaulted her again with a tree branch. After the murder, Chisholm went into town and used Ritzer's credit card to buy a movie ticket. When police caught him the next morning, he still had Ritzer's blood on his hands. A search of his backpack revealed Ritzer's underwear, purse, and the bloody box cutter. Chisholm was tried as an adult and convicted of first-degree murder, rape, and armed robbery. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years.
It is hereby ordered that you be committed to the Department of Youth Services until the age of 21, and furthermore committed to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Cedar Junction for the period of not less than 40 years and not more than 40 years and 1 day.
His defense admitted he committed the crime, but argued that he had a severe mental illness, experiencing hallucinations and psychotic episodes since age 10. They also mentioned his mother's difficult divorce as a possible factor. During sentencing, Ritzer's family and friends gave emotional statements. Her father called Chisholm pure evil.
And will never forgive him. He is evil, pure evil, and must be punished.
Additionally, Chisholm pleaded guilty to attacking a 29-year-old female clinician at a youth detention center in 2014. He tried to choke and kill her, but was stopped by other employees. For this attack, he was sentenced to 17 to 20 years in state prison, to be served at the same time as his sentence for Ritzer's murder. Up next, we have a teenage couple who teamed up to murder one of their exes. Amber Wright and Michael Bargo. In April 2011, Seth Jackson was murdered in Bellevue, Florida by a group of his peers. He was just 15 at the time. His ex-girlfriend, 15-year-old Amber Wright, lured him to a mobile home where he was ambushed and killed by several youths, including Wright's 18-year-old boyfriend, Michael Bargo. Jackson and Wright had dated for about 3 months before breaking up in March 2011 due to suspicions of cheating on both sides. They publicly exchanged insults on social media, with Jackson calling Wright derogatory names on Facebook. Wright then started dating Bargo, who became fixated on Jackson and orchestrated his murder. Bargo, who had a history of theft and carried a gun, gathered a group including Wright's 16-year-old stepbrother Kyle Hooper, 20-year-old Justin Soto, and 18-year-old Charlie Ely. On April 17, 2011, Wright tricked Jackson into going to Ely's house under false pretenses of resolving issues. There, the group ambushed Jackson, assaulted him, and Bargo shot him.
After being beaten and shot several times, Seth still managed to run outside where Kyle again made a choice to continue with the plan and bring Seth back inside, knowing he would not live.
After killing Jackson, they wrapped his body in a sleeping bag and burned it in a fire pit. The next day, Bargo and Soto disposed of Jackson's remains in an Ocala rock quarry. They put his body parts into paint buckets and sank them in the water using cinder blocks to weigh them down. The group was arrested and they turned on each other.
This case is the single most cold, calculated, premeditated case of murder that I have ever seen.
Bargo, who initiated the crime and pulled the trigger, was sentenced to death, becoming Florida's youngest death row inmate.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Michael Shane Bargo Jr., should be sentenced to death. Yes.
Right to life in prison. She chose not to speak on her own behalf, refused to look at pictures of Seth Jackson that were put on the screen.
Wright, Hooper, Soto, and Ely received life sentences for Jackson's murder. Up next is a case involving a teenage boy who murdered his entire family. Nicholas Wagoner Browning. On February 2, 2008, Nicholas Wagoner Browning, who was 15 years old at the time, killed his parents, John and Tamara Browning, and his younger brothers, 13-year-old Gregory and 11-year-old Benjamin. Nicholas, described as an honor student and Boy Scout, used his father's gun to shoot his family members while they were asleep. He then spent the night and most of the next day with friends before pretending to discover the bodies the following evening.
He came back out of the house, told the friends that he found his father dead inside. 911 was called. Police responded, found the father dead on the ground floor, his mother dead in a bedroom upstairs, and his two brothers dead upstairs, all dead from gunshot wounds.
However, he later confessed to the murders and showed police where he had disposed of the murder weapon in nearby bushes. In a recorded confession, Nicholas described how he committed the murders. He explained that he stood over the first victim, put a gun to his head, and pulled the trigger. Later, when his younger brother Ben began to wake up, Nicholas shot him twice in the face. Nicholas said he endured physical and verbal abuse from his father.
Months before the murder, he had told children on the bus, 16-year-old, 15-year-olds, that he was tired of his father telling him what to do, and he was going to kill his father, and he was going to kill his brother so he didn't have to share the inheritance.
A defense psychiatrist said he had a dissociative disorder and was in a trance-like state during the shootings, but state psychiatrists found no mental illnesses. Nicholas also said he killed his family because he didn't want his father's control and wanted the inheritance for himself.
Why would I jeopardize? You put money into it. I have a very large, or had to have whatever, inheritance coming to me, regardless if there's insurance money involved or not.
He admitted guilt for 4 counts of first-degree murder and received 4 life sentences, with 2 to be served back-to-back. If he behaves well, he could be eligible for parole in 2031, having served 23 years. The next entry is another teenager who murdered a police officer and struggled to take any responsibility for his actions. Jonathan Belton. On December 28, 2008, 16-year-old Jonathan Belton shot and killed Oak Park police officer Mason Samborski. Belton had been stopped by Samborski for driving without a license. Samborski tried to help by taking him to an apartment complex to find someone responsible to look after him. During their interaction, a struggle broke out, and Belton seized Samborski's gun, fatally shooting him in the head. Belton was found guilty of murdering a police officer and first-degree premeditated murder. He was also convicted of using a firearm during the crimes. Belton was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. During the trial, defense attorney Jeffrey Fieger argued that Samborski accidentally shot himself during a struggle with Belton. However, prosecutors insisted that Belton had taken the officer's gun and deliberately shot him. At Belton's sentencing, Samborski's family, including his widow Sarah Samborski, attended. She directly addressed Belton, accusing him of not only killing Mason, but also causing immense pain to their family.
I hope that one day you regret what you did and realize what you could have done differently. You are alive, and your family gets to see you and talk to you. We don't get to see or talk to Mason ever again. We get nothing but pain and wonderment of what our future could have been. Jonathan Belton, you shattered my happiness, my hopes, and my dreams.
Belton remained defiant, insisting on his innocence and reassuring his family that he would be released on appeal.
We know what really happened. I know what really happened. The Lord knows what really happened. I love you all to death. And I'm going to see y'all soon.
In the next case, a teenager murdered 2 people and received a well-deserved maximum sentence for it. Conrad Schaefer. In 2016, 18-year-old Conrad Schaefer was convicted for a series of violent crimes in Osceola County, Florida, dating back to 2013. He pleaded guilty to murdering 17-year-old David Guerrero as he headed to work and to the killing of 22-year-old Eric Rupnerine during a home invasion a few days later. Schaefer was also accused of multiple drive-by shootings in Kissimmee over a 2-week period, which caused widespread fear in the community. During his sentencing, Schaefer apologized to the victims' families. He deeply regretted his actions and understood they were wrong. The families reacted with anger.
I request my grandson, he was my helper. to me and my wife. At this time, my family and I had no intention to forgive the guilty because of such a heinous and brutal crime that was done to my grandson, Eric Rupenrein.
One relative even expressed wanting Schaefer to grasp the pain by imagining a gun to his head. State Attorney Jeff Ashton labeled Schaefer a sociopath and argued that a life sentence was crucial to protect the community. In contrast, Schaefer's attorney, Francis Iennico, advocated for a 40-year sentence, citing Schaefer's personal growth and rehabilitation following the incidents. During testimony, Schaefer's mother recounted how he was bullied in school due to weight gain and hair loss from battling leukemia. She also expressed frustration that despite her requests, the school did not provide counseling for him. Schaefer was sentenced to life in prison with a chance for a parole hearing after 25 years because he was underage when the crimes were committed.
Life, the possibility of sentence being reduced after 25 years.
Just like Conrad Schaefer, the next entry also murdered 2 innocent people. James Fairweather. James Fairweather was only 15 years old when he committed 2 brutal murders in Colchester, Essex in 2014. His victims were 33-year-old James Atfield and 31-year-old Nahid Almanea. He was also planning a 3rd murder when he was caught. In March 2014, Fairweather stabbed James Atfield over 100 times in a Colchester park while Atfield was drunk and defenseless.
I don't think that there is any clear motive for what has happened to James, and we would appeal to anybody who knows anything about this terrible murder to come forward and speak to the police.
Just days earlier, Fairweather had been given a referral order for robbing a shopkeeper at knife point. About 3 months later, on June 17th, he killed Nahid Almanea, a Saudi Arabian student at the University of Essex, by stabbing her in the brain, eyes, and abdomen.
She has been murdered in a way that can only be termed a brutal and savage attack. There are some obvious similarities between her death and that of James Atfield, who was stabbed to death in Colchester on March 29th this year.
Fairweather was arrested in May 2015 when a dog walker found him hiding in bushes with a knife and gloves. He was 17 at the time and claimed he was influenced by demonic possession and voices telling him to kill.
Some voices were talking to me, you need to make a sacrifice or we're going to come and get you.
He confessed to violent thoughts, including burning babies and harming prostitutes, during psychiatric evaluations. He had a fascination with serial killers like Peter Sutcliffe and Ted Bundy and enjoyed playing violent video games and watching horror movies. Fairweather was found guilty of 2 murder charges and received a life sentence with a minimum of 27 years. He appealed his sentence, arguing his youth should be considered, but his appeal was denied. The next entry is about 2 teenagers who murdered their teacher. Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale. On November 2, 2021, 2 16-year-olds, Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale, killed their 66-year-old Spanish teacher, Naheema Graber, with a baseball bat. They were upset because Miller had received a bad grade from Graber, which was affecting his GPA. The teens tricked Graber into going to Chautauqua Park in Fairfield, Iowa, where she usually walked after school.
November 2nd of 2021, I met Willard Miller at Chautauqua Park. I understood that he had the intent to kill Mrs. Graber.
They attacked her on the trail, beating her to death with a baseball bat. Afterward, they hid her body under railroad ties, a wheelbarrow, and a tarp.
Shaden had brought a bat, among other supplies, to go through with the murder. And after he had struck Naheema Graber, we then moved her off of the trail, where I then struck her, and she died.
Police identified Miller and Goodale as suspects after someone saw incriminating messages on Goodale's Snapchat. These messages described how they had watched Graber, planned the attack, carried it out, and disposed of the evidence. Miller initially denied any involvement, but later admitted he knew about the crime. He said a group of masked kids made him help move the body and drive Graber's van. Prosecutors argued both teens were involved in the brutal attack. Both Miller and Goodale were tried as adults, facing charges of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a serious crime. They pleaded guilty to murder and received life sentences. Miller must serve at least 35 years before parole eligibility.
That the defendant, Willard Noble Chaden Miller, should be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 35 years.
Goodale received a minimum of 25 years. During sentencing, Judge Sean Showers told Miller that he deserved his full sentence.
Those acts resulted in the intentional loss of human life in a brutal fashion. There's no excuse. There is not a systemic societal problem that explains or justifies your actions.
Before sentencing, Goodale apologized to Graber's family, the community, and his own family. He expressed deep remorse, saying he was truly sorry and acknowledging that what he had taken could never be replaced. Goodale added that every day he wished he could turn back time to prevent the pain and loss he had caused. Similar to Miller and Goodale, the next entry was just 16 when he murdered another teenager. Eric Blackaby. On July 28, 2015, 16-year-old Eric Matthew Blackaby hit 19-year-old William Allen Neff with a metal baseball bat during a fight at a popular teen spot in Shelby County, Alabama, called The Slab. The altercation was sparked by a dispute over a girl who had been romantically involved with both Neff and Blackaby's older brother. Tragically, Neff passed away 2 days later due to the injuries sustained in the incident. Blackaby was first charged with assault, but after Neff died, the charge was changed to murder. He was convicted after a 3-day trial in August 2017 and given a life sentence with a chance for parole.
New at 5, a Shelby County teenager who beat another teen to death will spend the rest of his life in prison.
During the trial, teenagers who witnessed the fight, including Blackaby and his brother, testified. In November 2017, Blackaby's lawyers asked for a new trial, saying the court was wrong to let the state change the indictment by removing mentions of multiple blows with the baseball bat. They also said Blackaby's rights under the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendments were violated, but the request was turned down. In August 2018, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals upheld Blackaby's conviction for murder and his life sentence. Up next is a teenage girl who murdered and buried her neighbor in a shallow grave. Alyssa Bustamante. On October 21, 2009, 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante killed her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Alton, in St. Martins, Missouri. Bustamante led the girl into the woods, strangled her, slashed her throat, and stabbed her in the chest. She then buried Alton's body in a shallow grave. Bustamante had a history of mental health problems, including depression, and had attempted suicide in 2007, which led to a 10-day hospital stay and a prescription for antidepressants.
I actually consulted one of our friends and he talked to her about it. We noticed a lot of scars on her wrists. She talked about suicide a lot. I know that she had attempted it a couple of times.
She also engaged in self-harm and listed killing people and cutting as hobbies on her YouTube page. She has been in the legal custody of her grandparents since 2002 because of her mother's addiction issues and her father's imprisonment.
Her father was in prison. He had gotten into some kind of physical altercation, and her mother was on drugs a lot.
In her diary, Bustamante wrote about the murder, saying she had killed someone by strangling, slashing their throat, and stabbing them. She expressed mixed feelings, describing it as both thrilling and nerve-wracking. She then casually mentioned going to church shortly after.
A journal, disturbing things that referred to burning down a house and killing the people in it. And then she noticed the last entry of the journal had a date of Wednesday, October 21st, appeared to be marked over in blue ink, a blue ink pen.
Bustamante originally faced serious charges of first-degree murder and armed criminal action, but later admitted guilt to lesser charges of second-degree murder and armed criminal action.
Basically, the main reason for accepting the offer was to avoid the absolute certainty of life without parole. If there was another option, then there would have been no reason to have accepted that offer.
She received a life sentence with a chance for parole starting in 2024. In 2014, Bustamante appealed her sentence, claiming she wouldn't have pleaded guilty if she knew about a pending Supreme Court case that deemed mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. The judge, however, rejected her plea for a new sentence. In the final entry of this video, a teenager murdered his boyfriend and his friend in a carefully planned and executed car crash. Mackenzie Sherilla. On July 31, 2022, 17-year-old Mackenzie Sherilla intentionally crashed her car into a brick wall at 100 Malot Maf. This tragic act resulted in the deaths of her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, and his friend, 19-year-old Davion Flanagan. Earlier, Sharilla had threatened to crash her car during an argument with Russo. On the day of the crash, Sharilla followed through on her threat, accelerating to 100 mph until her car was completely destroyed. Sharilla was found guilty of multiple serious charges, including murder, assault, vehicular homicide, drug possession, and possessing criminal tools. She received a sentence of 15 years to life in prison.
I understand that the pain in this room wants me to impose the harshest sentence, but I don't believe that would be the appropriate sentence. So she's sentenced on count 2, the murder of Davion Flanagan, 15 years to life. She's sentenced on count 1, the murder of Dominic Russo, 15 years to life.
At the sentencing, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo described Sharilla's actions as deliberate and precise.
The defendant controlled all the events. She chose to drive the car, the time to drive the car. She chose an obscure, previously scouted route through an industrial parkway. She chose the target to hit and the victims. She chose the means and the method to follow through. And she planned and purposefully executed the events of July 31st, 2022.
During the sentencing, Sharilla apologized to the victims' families, saying she couldn't remember the crash.
The families of Dom and Davion, I'm so deeply sorry. I hope one day you can see I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. I wish I could remember what happened. I'm just so sorry. I'm heartbroken. I love Dom and Davion. We were all friends and Dom was my soulmate.
If you enjoyed this video, click on the card showing on your screen right now for more videos.